This episode is brought to you by Generate Solutions, your go-to AI experts specializing in empowering commercial real estate companies and environmental consulting firms. As AI is quickly transforming industries and enhancing efficiency, it is important you don't let your business fall behind. At Generate Solutions, we streamline workflows and automate tasks by creating custom AI agents tailored specifically to your business needs. Interested in taking your operations to the next level with AI? Email mfiorante@generatesolutions.com or find us directly on LinkedIn by clicking the link in the bio. On to our episode.
Good afternoon and welcome to another edition of A Conversation with John Conenna. Tonight is kind of a special one, a kind of a different route. This is the first time we're going to have basically a 4-panel audience, and some of the gentlemen you have seen before, and then we have a nice young lady in our audience who's the sister of the 3 gentlemen. We tonight are going to go back in time, talk about an era gone by. It's the era of growing up in Chicagoland, back in the 40s, 50s, and 60s, and how they grew up in a town called Cicero. We're talking tonight to the Ruzicka family, and we have Carl Ruzicka, we have Tom Ruzicka, Tony, Barbara, and of course I'm your host tonight, John Conenna. Tony and Carl have been on a few times on our program to promote a great book. And of course, Tom was part of a time when we did a special on the Chicago Blackhawks through a gentleman named Chico Mackey. But the book that I'm going to hold up is The Twins, which is still out there for purchase, which was authored by Carl and Tony. And this is about a journey of a lifetime, twin brothers' journey through Chicago sports history and the recollections of a bygone era. A great book, still available on Amazon, still available at Barnes & Noble. And this is how I met Carl, of course, and then Tony Ruzicka. And it's been a great relationship, and now it's become a great friendship. Barbara, I'm going to start with you. I'll start it like this. Do you remember those early years, and of course with these 3 gentlemen and your great parents? What's one of those first thoughts growing up in that town of Cicero and going back in time?
I think the first memories I have that I would tell you are of my father's stepmother, which was my grandmother, which we called Bubby in Czechoslovakian language. She lived downstairs from us, from my dad and mom, and I lived upstairs in the house that we lived in. And she was not a very kind woman to my mom, but she was wonderful to me. And I remember many a night spending the night with her in this feather bed that she had with this beautiful down comforter and just enjoying her. And I did end up speaking Czech with her. I did learn because I was the firstborn. And I spoke Czech with her and ended up going to, actually, we call it Bohemian School, and went for probably a year and a half. I did learn a little bit more about the language, but I never really spoke it much. Wow. But that was probably my earliest memory.
Tom, I will go to you next. An early memory, I'm glad Barb opened it up that way because it was kind of a little bit of a touching story. We can always go back to that. But Tom, what do you remember?
Well, I actually do not remember the lady that was called Bubby, my dad's stepmother. But I guess I remember my earliest memories were playing in the yard and playing out in the front neighborhood we had a lot of neighbors right up and down the street. And even at 3 and 4 years old, we would be out doing all the things people did then, playing, I shouldn't say it, cowboys and Indians, and even at 3, 4, and 5 years old. And so I remember a lot about that. And it was a neighborhood that had a lot of kids our age at that time.
Wow. Tony, your thoughts of that early memory?
Sort of the same, we played ball on the street, we played ball in the alley, you know, we played pinners, some people call it stoop ball, and
Right.
We were always doing something, and then we knew pretty much all of our neighbors.
Sure.
Sometimes they sit on the porch and watch us play. Sometimes they get mad because the ball went in their yard, but for the most part, it was a neighborhood where everyone got along and knew each other.
Carl, I always talk to you about this, but bring up something that really touches you about Cicero, Carl.
Well, it's the earliest memory I have is Tony and I with our dog, Fox Terrier Spotty, and was our pal. And I can remember Tony and I crawling to the dog food bowl, and Spotty and the two of us partaking in her meal. Right. It was sort of like in a honeymooner routine when Ralph Cramden's mystery appetizer was dog food. It was pretty. It was real tasty, John. The dog was our dog was an integral part of all of our lives.
Yeah, our dog Spotty was by far my best friend early, but she was also the disposal for food I didn't like that my mom would cook. And she would always sit right at my side, and I'd eat something and drop it off to the side. And my mom always thought I would eat all the meals, and I just smiled away because the dog got heavier and heavier.
Spotty was cleaning up. Barb, I'm going to go back to you and a question that I'd like to know, because I just feel, we're basically, even myself here being the interviewer tonight, we're cut from the same cloth. I have to tell you, just listening, of course, I do speak with Carl a lot. How was the home life with these two great parents that you had? I mean, how was it? Because, we're never going to have a generation like this again. Because I miss my parents. Describe this home life with these two parents.
My home life with Tony and Carl?
No, with mom
or
and
your
dad.
parents. Yeah, your
with mom and dad.
Oh.
Yeah.
I would have to say it was wonderful, really.
Yeah.
I mean, my brothers, all of us got along well. We played outdoors together. I mean, I played with them with the sport,
sure.
The sports that they were interested in. We would watch television, Perry Como, and all sit in the living room and watch the one TV. We only ever had one TV in the house. And, we'd have our meal, and then we'd clean up after eating. One would wash dishes, the others would dry. We kind of rotated through, and the kitchen was the hub of the house. We did homework around the kitchen table. We talked after dinner around the kitchen table. There was always conversation. Sometimes our dad would come home later than we did, so we would have dinner without him.
Sure.
But nonetheless, there was never a rush to get through dinner. We would always sit and talk and laugh. And I mean, I loved it. I thought it was perfect, truly. Looking back and looking now at what some of the homes are like and the children experience, I think we were all very, very fortunate.
I can imagine. Carl, I'm going to go to you on that one. Can you kind of feed off what Barb has just told us?
Well, our mom and dad were interested in everything we were interested in, only because we were interested in it. My father followed and mom followed the sports. They really could care less, but they cared because we cared. But our mom and dad were not totally idyllic. They got into arguments, and when they got into arguments, it was sort of a tense situation for the four of us. And our fathers response to a lot of those arguments was to give the silent treatment. And that was a real tense period of time. And then when he finally spoke, we knew like everything was forgiven, and it was totally forgiven. All of a sudden, they're dancing to music on the radio and hugging each other and kissing each other. And I think all four of us sort of, in our own way, breathe a sigh of relief.
Sure.
That everything's back to normal.
And thank you for putting that way before I go to Tom and Tony. That I remember that in my household too. And the next day, that argument was forgotten because, here nowadays, this is what is missing. And thank you for both putting that way. Tom, your recollections before I go to Tony about that same situation growing up with these great parents.
Well, the thing was, one thing we learned to be as Ruzickas, and you probably know that, is loud.
Yes.
Because of the parents arguing, okay?
Very,
right.
very loud.
They never went to bed mad. They always made up, which was a very, very important thing. And when you talk about dinners and dancing and so on, we would eat dinner every night at 6 o'clock. If my dad wouldn't be there, then the rest of us would eat. But we'd also turn on the radio, the old Zenith radios.
Oh, yeah.
And we'd turn on the old radio, and from 6 to 6:30 would be the top tunes of the day. And my mom and even my dad, they would sing all this music. And they got me singing, and Barb once in a while. I'm not sure how much you guys sang during that. You were probably already, that was probably before you got a little older. But I mean, we all sang together, and music was a very important part of our life.
Well, Tony?
Well, I would say most of the times when my parents would argue, it's usually when my dad would come home Monday night. He'd go to the steam baths, all right? And he'd come home later. And sometimes he'd come home with a little bit, too much to drink, and
Okay.
that my mom would get mad at him. And that's most of the times when they would argue. But Carl and Tom hit it right on the head. After they were done arguing, ultimately they would dance.
Yeah, by all four of you, that was great, because that's okay, it's done, it's over with. Let's move forward instead of staying on the same thing. I want to. There's a question that I've wanted to ask because of you guys growing up in Cicero, and my dad being an Italian immigrant coming here in 1948 told me about Cicero. So when I met Carl and he told me that you guys were from Cicero, it really intrigued me. But I'm going to open this question up for Carl of this next question. Cicero's notoriety, of course, is of the Italian gangster Al Capone and segregation. Did these aspects of this Capone and this Cicero affect your childhood in any way growing up in that era, Carl?
Well, at an early age, it was a feeling of pride.
Okay.
All right. So, especially when the Untouchables were on with the Elliot Ness, with Robert
Stack.
Right. And, they talk about Al Capone's henchmen, the Jenner brothers, and their nephews were in our class in grade school.
Wow.
So we couldn't wait to get to class the next day and, hey, Pete, hey, Joey, your uncles were on TV again. All right. And our father wore what do you call it, a fedora? But a wide brim hat like Al Capone wore. And they people around the neighborhood didn't confuse our father with Al Capone, but they said maybe he's Ralph Capone. Because Ralph Capone lived on Austin about 1600 south on Austin. And then, we'll touch on it later, but we used to go to vacation in Washington Island, Wisconsin, Door County, and we had a 1949 used black Lincoln, and our father looked a lot like Senator McCarthy from Wisconsin. So a lot of people thought that our father was Senator McCarthy, with the communist scare.
McCarthy was blaming actors like Lucille Ball and that they were communists.
Exactly.
I remember that. Yeah.
Early, if you don't mind, they were proud of McCarthy because he was doing, but the more he went into his actions and activities, they saw that was not so appealing. So my dad tried not to look like him after that, so people didn't take and look at him like, who are you? You shouldn't be here, or whatever. So it was very interesting.
Well, Tom, tell a story about breaking up with one of the daughters.
That's
of
later.
One of the
we
mob
get there later.
No, we're talking about it now.
Barbara, I know you wanted to say something, and I know you're know a little bit more about this
Not so much about the Capone era, because it didn't really affect me, or I didn't think about it that much. But
exactly.
I was 11 years old when the biggest riot took place in Cicero.
What was it about?
A black family had moved in, and thousands rioted that house, threw out their furniture, tore out their sinks, stove, everything out onto the street, burned the house. Adlai Stevenson called in the National Guard. Now, my father took me there.
I was there too.
And that affected me for the rest of my life, because I believe I have no prejudices. And I think that none of us have prejudices. Mom and Dad never really talked about that in the house, but the way they lived and the friends that they had taught us that everyone is the same.
Do you remember who the mayor was at that time not of Cicero so much, but of Chicago?
I'm not certain. Yeah. I know Stevenson was the governor. That I knew.
It could have been Daley.
It could have been Daley's
early years, because I think Daley came in 56.
Yes.
This was 51. So
51.
Not sure.
Tony,
I'll talk a little bit about the race part of it. It's written in our book. Our hero was Ernie Banks. And that made a big difference in our lives. Because how could we be anti-black when our hero was black? And Barb brought it up about my mom and dad. They would talk to everyone when they were on a walk, and it didn't matter who they were, what color they were, or anything. They would talk to them. We'd had a black mailman. My mom would invite him to the house. Inside the house were coffee or water, and they were friendly. So that's how we became, hopefully. So
yes.
And for that time, I mean, because I know Barb brings up that riot situation, but for your parents to be like that, am I wrong to say that 85% of the other people probably weren't like your parents?
Oh, I would say more than 85%.
Okay. I'm being kind here, right?
Yeah.
Carl, you want to kind of elaborate that, or Tommy after that? But Carl, do you remember this kind of a situation?
And I can add to this that when I taught school, which was from 66 to 71 or 2, and before I went into business for myself, our school district was not funded federally, and so therefore they did not need to collect federal funds and didn't have to follow the integration rules at that time. And so when I was teaching, I had one session that kind of got me a little into trouble, but I had one session where I asked the kids, how would you feel about Ernie Banks coming to dinner? Because we were all great sports fans, and they but that'd be wonderful, that'd be wonderful. So then I mentioned some of the other people politically then, and that the ones that knew, no way, we couldn't do that. So I did a little session on prejudice, where for 2 days half the class wore an armband and the other half did not, and the half with the armbands were treated with the most disrespect possible, and the others were treated with everything on a golden platter. And then we reversed it, and it was very interesting to get the response from the students, because they recognized a lot of what they saw happening probably was not the best thing. Yes.
Yeah, Tom, didn't you get reprimanded?
Oh, yeah.
The administration.
Yep.
You want to kind of feed off this a little bit on what your thoughts?
I think Tom left out that's an important part that Tom can speak to it. Go ahead, Tom.
And what's that?
Being reprimanded by the administration for your 2-day session.
Well, yeah, they thought that was the worst thing in the world, because my role was to, shouldn't say it this way, but to teach them exactly what the book said, not to teach them to think. And I taught school to teach the kids to think. And so I did get in trouble.
But again, I like what you did. Innovative for the time, don't you think?
Yeah, they sure thought so.
Give me that timeline again. You were a teacher in 66?
That would have been, actually, I taught 66 to 72. Okay. And actually, I taught during the time frame of the 68 riots, too.
Well, yeah, because now we're talking Martin Luther King. We're talking Martin Luther King. We're talking the Democratic Convention. So there was a big, I almost could compare those years to what has happened here from 20 to 25 here, the way our city has turned here too.
Really? Wow.
I want to ask Tony this next question, and then we'll all feed off it. I'm trying to take turns to keep it where we'll all one starts and one finishes. Tony, as a family, as your brothers and your sister, did you feel that you were part of a neighborhood growing up in Cicero? Did you really feel like this was a tight-knit situation?
Oh, absolutely. We did stuff together almost all the time. And
right.
With neighbors.
And you can remember, if your friend Larry from the 50 years ago, you can remember all this, correct?
Larry's house was where most of the time we would play pinners off of Larry's porch, sometimes off of our porch. Terry had a larger front yard. His home was set in the back, so we'd play catch in his yard if we weren't playing on the street. Dale Bernhardt lived across the street. We would play wiffle ball in his backyard, and he set rules. If you hit it into the neighbor's house on the right, it was 2 outs. If you hit it into the neighbor's house on the left, it was 3 outs. If you made it over the yard onto the street, it was a grand slam homer. So
all the ground rules of the day. Barb, can you bring in the lady faction?
John, the ground rules for the outs was, the neighbor who was mean was automatically 2 outs, and the neighbor who was really mean was 3 outs. So that was our incentive, to try to not to hit the balls in those yards, so we might not get the ball back.
So there were, Barb, there were a lot of people your age growing up there. From left
I did.
Yeah.
I had several friends my age. One was probably maybe 1 or 2 years older, and the rest, the girls, were my age. So, and then I played with the boys because I like playing sports.
Especially growing up with these guys.
He's a good second baseman.
Whenever we had to run an errand for Mom, we'd leave the house, and we knew all the neighbors. And the neighbors, a lot of them would sit outside on the porch. We'd stop and say hello, talk for a bit. We went to the neighborhood store. Everyone knew who we were. We knew who they were. You know, it was living right off of Central and Cermak. We could walk everywhere. It was a real neighborhood.
And it was probably that time, because again, like I said, my father describes the era where I was from, where you could keep the door open or the window open at night and not worry of what could happen.
I didn't think about that, so I don't know.
Yeah. Carl, feeding off the neighborhood, because I know you love talking about that kind of stuff before we go to Tom. What are those recollections for you, that neighborhood?
Well, I mean, it was idyllic for us. And, we talked about our dog Spotty, all right? Yeah. And most of the establishments on Cermak Road, you could not bring your dog in.
Okay.
Except our dog was allowed in many of the establishments because it was a well-behaved dog and then was welcome. And it was like a source of pride for the four of us.
Sure.
That our dog had like a special rule. All right. Set aside. All right. So our dog was very well trained, never had a leash. There wasn't as much traffic then as there is now, but it was still Central Avenue and Cermak for that time had traffic, right? When we would stop, the dog would stop. All right. The establishments where we couldn't bring the dog in, the dog would wait outside we'd say, wait here, wait. All right. And the dog would just wait till we came out. So one recollection, one of the stores on Cermak Road had two entryways, almost alongside each other, but had two ways you can get in. And, it's okay, we would say, we'll be a few minutes or something, right? Like if the dog could understand.
Sure.
Right? But anyway, we exited the door the different door, not the door that we walked in. And we're all at home enjoying ourselves. And we said, wait a second, where's Spotty? All right. So we ran back to the store. Spotty was waiting at the door where we went in. So it was she was really well behaved. All right.
I can imagine.
As we got older and Spotty got older, if we were in there too long, I think Spotty said, "I'd heck with it and just go home by herself and meet us at home."
Tom, recollection for you?
Well, being that it was the old type of neighborhoods, within a block was everything you needed. There was a grocery store, there was a barber shop, there was a fruit store, there was a butcher, all right? There were 3 taverns, being the old neighborhood. But I mean, everything you needed was right there. And we even got to know the kids of all these people that owned all these places, and they were part of the groups we played with. So it was very, very interesting, and never worrying about anything at all. You could just walk where you wanted. When we were playing ball, we didn't have much grass in our neighborhood. In fact, the biggest place we had of grass was maybe a 4-lot by 4-lot area called a park. That was about 8 blocks away. But, all cement, and we played ball in the cement, and like Carl's saying, with the different rules, we play in one young man's yard, and it was all dirt. There was not a stitch of grass, and because it was so small, we couldn't use a bat and ball. We used ping pong balls, wiffle balls, ping pong paddles, anything we could. We batted opposite hand rather than the right hand,
right?
So that we wouldn't hit.
We had all bad lefty because there was a gutter at the corner of the house coming down, and if the pitcher hit the gut, that was a gutter ball. That was an automatic, intentional walk.
So you had all those ground rules going on again. Question for
I will say, John, this when we're walking through, all of our neighbors were also very kind to us. All right.
Yeah.
But I think probably we learned from our parents that number one, we were taught to respect them.
Respect.
But we were also taught to sit down and kibitz, ask them questions, or be there and answer the questions that they had for us. So we're like never in any particular hurry to get home.
Sure.
So we might stop and go on 3 or 4 different porches on our way to our front door.
Exactly. Wow. Tony, I'm going to start this off because I come from Norridge, Illinois. And of course, the main street was Harlem Avenue. And when I was a kid growing up, we had the outdoor theater at Harlem and Irving. And of course, we had an outdoor mall there at that time, which still exists, but now it's an indoor mall. So, Tony, the question is this, and I want everybody to, what was that recollection of that Cermak Road? What do you remember about Cermak Avenue?
Well, what I remember most is that, once again, my parents would always talk to everybody when they would always walk to the store. You wouldn't such a thing as taking your car to the store. And they talked to everybody, and they knew the owners of the store. They knew the workers in the store. And you'd walk in, and everyone would greet you right away. And it's if Carl and I went in by ourselves, they go, "How are your mom and dad doing?" There was always a conversation going on. And most of the time, you'd go in, they go, "Oh, I think you guys need some white bread. It's over there on the counter." "Oh, you guys probably need this." They remember what we bought most of the time.
Sure.
And it was like just wonderful. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I would
Barbara,
say
we
spent most of the time going west from Central.
Yeah.
All right.
Wow.
But we didn't go too much time to the east.
To the east, okay. Well, I mean, because there was this change between the two. I mean, the east and the west.
Because you went east to turn in across Cicero Avenue was a black neighborhood.
Got it. Okay. Again, and I think everybody has a section of their town where you, at that time, you had to be aware of. We'll use that word, right? Barbara, what do you remember of Cermak and those early?
Most of the businesses were to the west. And we had a wonderful movie theater right on the corner of Central and Cermak. That when I went to the movies very young, starting in like 2nd grade. I would meet my friends and we go to the movies, 10 cents to get in, which was terrific. It was a beautiful movie theater. You'd walk in and it had the red carpeting that took you up to the kind of a little slope, and in the back was this beautiful big mirror that you could see yourself in walking up, and then it had a little balcony. I mean, it was the fabulous place to meet all the friends.
What was the name of the theater?
Villas.
Oh, Villas, okay.
Villas Theater.
And then
later, when I was working, I actually worked above the Villas Theater because I worked for a dentist that had his office up and above the Villas Theater. But Cermak Road was just everything you wanted was right there. And my mom and dad were, especially dad, not so much mom, but dad was a huge walker. So from early on, we learned to walk, and we walked a lot. We really, everywhere, all the way to Lombard and Ridgeland. And
I can imagine.
John,
Caroline, you want to say something?
Said there were 2 other theaters too, the Olympic and the Berwyn Theater.
Yep. Well,
Olympic was
the Olympic
roughly Lombard, and the Berwyn Theater was roughly Ridgeland. So we had three theaters to go to show, and that's what we used to do on Saturday afternoons.
Right. Tom, a recollection of what they're talking about, that impression of Cermak Avenue?
Well, the going back to the Villas again, I mean, during the winters, we go in for the first show and stay for 3 different movies, all B-rated movies, the old, not the best movies, but Westerns and different things.
Sure.
And we would stay the whole time and come home for dinner, and I remember Barb said it was 10 cents to get in. And so for 20 cents, you could get either popcorn and a Coke total. So for 20 cents, you had a whole afternoon. And that was pretty enjoyable. I think we did a lot of that.
And they used to run serials. So every week was like we have now on TV, episodes, but they were called serials then. We had Hopalong Cassidy and Roy Rogers and, Flash Gordon.
Flash Gordon, yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
With Buster Crab. Sure.
Yep, Buster Crab, right.
Yeah, exactly. I remember all that kind of thing. Growing up with my parents, and this is really touching this thing today. I'm just going to stop this for 1 second to remind our audience. We are visiting with the Ruzickas, a family that grew up in Cicero, and we're going back in time and telling about their era of how they grew up in this town and just the phenomenal experiences that they had and great memories that is something you talk about bygone. Maybe the two other Ruzicka brothers should have wrote about Cicero. This is fantastic. And we're touching on so many things. And, just listening to your stories tonight, and we have a few more to talk about. This is what I think is missing in our world, today. So what I want to ask you is this: growing up in an Italian family and growing up with my father, who was a tax accountant, going out to eat was a no-no. Ordering a pizza was a no-no. Did you guys, and I'll start it with Carl, did you guys go out to eat with this mom and dad Ruzicka a lot or no?
I would say once a year. We went to George Diamond Steakhouse. That was on Wabash and around Harrison. And that was before that. We all went to one of the, like, Chicago Theater or McVickers, whatever, one of the main theaters. And I remember seeing Ben-Hur, Flower Drum Song, all right? But it was like once a year where we would venture downtown for a relatively popular movie that was out, and then we would go to George Diamond's Steakhouse. So go ahead, Barb.
Barbara, go ahead.
When we were younger, then you guys were young. I don't know how old but I would say maybe.
Barb, you're younger than all of them the way you're looking here tonight. Don't worry.
Maybe 10, 8, and 3, maybe. Really young. Dad and Mom would take us downtown to Gimbel's. Do you remember that? We would walk down the stairs to this restaurant, and they were, as Carl said, we didn't go often, but they remembered us because we all were so well behaved. And when we got to our seats, they would always bring us this little box of crayons and some paper so that we could entertain ourselves while we were eating. But Gimbel's, to me, was a really good memory.
And that had to be a big deal for you to remember.
A huge memory, yes, huge deal, for sure.
Yeah, and we didn't drive there, we took the L.
Yeah, the L.
Yep, yeah, we didn't.
Yeah, Dad did not like to drive.
So a great experience taking the L to go to Gimbel's, for sure. I can imagine. Yeah. Tom, what do you remember of those days with your parents?
When we went to the Chicago Theater for the movies, maybe it was before Tony and Carl were old enough, but Barbara will remember, after the movie, they would have a big band come out and they'd have entertainment for an hour or so afterwards.
Wow.
And I don't remember anything about this lady, but my dad loved this singer called Kitty Callan. And she was one of the performers. And I think Frank Sinatra would come at times and sing after movies also over there. We didn't see him, but I remember that. It was like a very special time. And I remember once going to a radio show called Chicago on the Air. Or do you remember this, Barb? What was this? And you go there and they would be doing skits on the radio with people doing the sound effects and different things, and everybody talking into the mics and making it sound like the storms were coming, and we could watch that. I thought it was Chicago Theater of the Air.
Fireside Theater?
It was through WGN.
Yeah.
Wow. So John, you have to remember that Barbara and Tom when they did math problems, they did it with charcoal on the back of a shovel. When we did it, we had already had paper and pen.
Okay, we're going back here now. Watch it.
I was going to say, in terms
Tony,
of the
you
restaurant.
remember that? You remember those things going with your parents and how they've described it?
Well,
I'm sorry.
I was not going to mention the parents.
I'm sorry,
I was
Bob,
going to bring up the neighbor, Larry Proska's father.
Yeah.
Every now and then would take us to Parky's. Yeah, you've probably been to Parky's on Harlem.
Yeah, that's the hot dog stand, right?
Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
And that was a big deal to go to Parky's.
Oh God, yeah.
And it was,
I remember like the first time when my dad took me to a Burger King, I didn't wash my hands for 3 days so I could smell the onions. You know.
So I'll
you
add
mentioned
to
the L
thing. Go ahead, Tom.
I know, just say it was a big thing for us to take the L even at a young age.
Yeah.
Oh,
you know,
sure.
And we, you know, I would say probably when we were 9 or 10, we were allowed to go on the L by ourselves.
Sure.
Yes, you were. And that really upset me. I could never do that at that age.
They took them. And I was the one when I was 14. I was taking them.
Well, remember, Barb, you were the ladies, so they were always going to be watching over you.
That's right.
How was it when you got to the age, all of you? Did you have jobs? Do you remember your first jobs in that town?
Yep.
I do.
We'll start with Carl. Carl, do you remember the first job that you had after school in the summer when you guys were kids?
Well, you know, our real jobs, once we turned 16, our father was a monotype, worked on a monotype keyboard in a printing for advertising company, Hayes Lochner type artist, 160 East Illinois.
Wow.
So once we turned 16, we didn't have a week vacation after school was out. You know, if the school was out on Friday, Monday, we were showing up for work. Because our father was a well-respected employee, the company always found jobs for Tony and I. And we worked all the way through from, you know, that time we turned 16 until we finished graduate school. We would work there part-time, either in the summers in graduate school. You know, we work sometimes in the afternoons and stuff. Not in the summer, but during the full year. But the first job that Tony and I had, we had our town had the Cicero Life newspaper, and Berwyn Life newspaper is basically the same paper. But Tony and I split a paper route that was from Central to 54th. 22nd place to 23rd place, and just that rectangular area there, and we would deliver papers. So that was our first income earning job. And Tony was just talking about it the other day. Last night we were together with some high school friends talking about the blizzard in 1967.
67.
And Tony and I took our shovels along for the paper route and shoveled everybody's stairway and sidewalks, at least the first go around, right? Yeah. And especially the elderly people, no matter what, we'd always shovel their walks as part of our school paper delivery, all right? And telling somebody that you would go to collection time, and you know, some of the people were well in their 80s already. You know, we thought it was ancient, right? We're, you know, closing in on it. Some of us are there already, all right? Sure. But you know, don't worry. You know, Mrs. Zimmer, you're looking around and fumbling in her purse and everything, and Tony, I was just forget it. We'll spot you the money. All right.
Exactly.
So we took it out of our little cigar box, you know, to make good with the administration for Cicero Life.
Tom,
so that was our first job delivering papers.
Tom, your first job, you remember it? Those early jobs.
Oh yeah. I started working at 12. And I
Wow.
was selling newspapers at the end of the line for the Douglas L on 54th and right off of Cermak. And
Wow.
I would sell the afternoons. I'd be at a little stand to be able to sell the paper for those people who were working in that Cicero area, traveling back east to Chicago, or the ones coming off the L who were going home. I sold the Chicago American, used to
Oh,
be an
wow.
afternoon paper, and then the Daily News was afternoon then. And I did that, and then I also probably for about 6 month time frame in the winter, I got up at 5:30 to sell coffee at this little convenience stand that was there right at that beginning or end of the line over there. So I did that early. And
that would be early in the morning, right? Early in the morning.
Early in the morning. Yep.
Wow. Wow. Tony, I know Carl brought up some things that you guys did together. One that sticks out for you, a job that you remember?
Well, it was, I'll bring back the 1967 snow disaster. You know, we went to high school at Morton East, and you didn't have cell phones back then or anything, but
No,
no one canceled school. There were no phone calls to your parents. There will be no school today. So we go to school, and both Carl and I had the first class. We didn't have a class. So we were just sort of in the cafeteria or walking around doing whatever. And we get to school, and what the administration didn't realize is that a lot of the teachers couldn't make it to school. So you had all these rooms with the kids in the classroom, but no teacher. So I took a piece of blank white paper and went into each classroom without a teacher and said, like as if I was reading it, due to today's heavy snowfall, class has been canceled today. Please do not linger at your lockers. Go directly home. And the whole high school left. So
wow.
they ended up canceling it.
Wow. Incredible. Barbara,
I was a hero for one day.
What was that? Sure. Do you
Did
remember that?
A lot of babysitting, of course. Okay.
What age did you start working yourself? I know Tom mentioned 12 years old. When did you start?
I would say 9.
Oh, wow.
Did a lot of babysitting for little ones in the area. And then I worked at Crawl, which was a record company on Cermak Road. The record company in those days allowed you to go into a booth to listen to the record you were wanting to purchase to see if you really wanted to purchase it. So it had, many special little areas where people could do that.
And we're talking like 45s and 78s then, right?
Yes.
45 that you would put on a turntable and a 70.
No, actually not the 45. These were the 78s. 45s were later.
Big album,
45s were later. But what I did was I addressed envelopes. They would send out, if something like they were having a sale or whatnot, and I would address the envelopes and stuff them and send them out for, to prospective,
How old were you
hopefully customers. What?
How old were you?
I think I was probably 12. And then when I was a little older, I worked at Montgomery Ward, which was also on Cermak Road. So.
Yeah. Great. You know what? And here I think, just listening to you guys, and, all of you, the work ethic was always in all of you, and nowadays you can't get somebody to go work at a Dairy Queen in any family. I have to ask you, what was the family vacations of the Ruzickas? What if there was a vacation, because you had these hardworking parents, you had the mother that was dedicated, but we'll start with you, Tom. Do you remember what a Ruzicka family vacation was growing up?
It was only to one place. That's why I put the one finger up. We would travel to north of Door County, Wisconsin, off of Gills Rock, which is at the end of the thumb of Wisconsin, where you have Green Bay and then
Green Bay.
And we would go to Washington Island, that was how many miles, guys? 7 miles or 10 miles off of the coast.
Right.
And we take a ferry there, and we would spend initially 2 weeks and then finally 3 weeks every summer there. And my dad saved up his money all year long, and all his overtime money and everything went to that. And that was during that time that we were probably the closest, because my dad wasn't working or involved with all of his other club activities.
Sure.
And so it was really good. And I did a lot of fishing with him. Barb and I did a lot of swimming. Barb got into a lot of trouble with the young men out there at that time.
Barbara, I didn't expect that.
Don't believe everything they tell you about me.
And I took Tony and Carl when they were about maybe 7 or 8 years old. There is another island past that one called Rock Island that is now a state park of Wisconsin. And I took a little rowboat with a 3.5 horse motor, and we took the 3.5 mile trip across to Rock Island just so we could go see the boathouse over there. And when we came back, the parents are waving. We thought, this is great. They're saying hello. We got killed.
Oh, gee.
They were very upset. We certainly got reprimanded.
John, Tony and I don't know how to swim. Never learned how to swim.
Yeah.
Deathly afraid of water. So, that island, the biggest thing to do is either fish or swim. So we fished, but we certainly didn't swim.
Quick, how long did it take to get there? Nowadays.
Now it takes about 5 hours. Then it took about 6.5 or 7 hours. And
God, it was like going to New York.
Yeah. No highways then. It's 300 miles from Chicago or from Cicero.
Right, but a beautiful area, area.
So, John, I will say, you ask him about the vacations. Barb and Tom can speak to the one vacation that wasn't Washington Island that was a real educational trip. Tony and I were too young to know anything about it. So go ahead, Barb.
Our father had gone to school to learn to be a monotype operator right after Mom and Dad were married. And he met this one man who he retained a friendship with him over the years. And the friend said, if you're ever in New York, stop by, because we're always home. We never go anywhere. So Dad decided we were going to go and visit him, not telling him we were coming because he's always home, right? So we get into, Dad at that time had this Dodge that literally ate oil like you wouldn't imagine. He had a huge case of oil in the trunk, and every time we'd stop, he'd have to fill up the oil contained the reservoir. And we drove all the way across country to New York. Of course, once we got there, the man wasn't home.
Oh,
so Dad was able to find us an absolutely wonderful hotel, which was a challenge because at that time there was some convention. I don't know if it was the Shriners or Shriners.
Oh, God.
But beautiful, beautiful hotel. The man, I think, at the desk felt sorry for us because he put us into this suite, which was larger than our house. We each had our own bedroom, which we didn't have in our house.
Oh, my God.
And it had a swimming pool with a natural saltwater waterfall. It was a real treat. We went around to see the sights. So we did. That was and then here's the funniest thing, though, John. Tony and Carl don't remember this, but I remember this. So you had to be old enough to have Mom and Dad let you do this, because they would ride up and down on the elevator all day long. And at that time, there was a man that would operate the elevator. So they became friends with that man. So they were up and down all day long. Now, here we are, we're just a really middle-class family, so we didn't have any suitcases. So Mom packed everything in cardboard boxes. And she wrote on the box, underwear, Barbara's tops, Tom's shirts, Tony and Carl's socks, that kind of thing.
Sure.
And every morning, she would send one of us out with the list of what to take out of each box. And we'd walk into the hotel with everything draped over our arms, walking through this luxurious hotel into the elevator with the
You have to picture this. When we first get in there, and he says, "Can we have the bellman get your luggage?" And we had a suitcase that was about 10 by 12 in size. And the rest were cardboard boxes. And my dad goes,
Oh,
"Oh, no,
wow.
no, 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 we'll get our own," right? And so every day, as Barbara said, we go out there, and it was rush hour in Brooklyn, is where we're at. It was the St. George Hotel then.
Hotel.
So
We were parked on
it
a
was rush
street.
hour, and we're taking clothes out of a box and stuff while all these people are going to work.
Incredible.
Putting everything away and then hiding to sneak in with all these clothes.
I got to get over to Tony here because we're running down on time. But Tony, what do you remember about those vacations? If you can elaborate on some of the things these were.
Well,
great
I'll go to
experience.
Washington Island. My mom and dad became good friends with almost everybody on the island.
Yeah.
Everyone knew their names.
Now, was this once a year?
Yes.
Yeah, we
Once
would
a
go
year.
once
Once a year.
and we'd
Wow.
stay roughly in the same cabin all the time. But we'd go out to dinner then, and we'd go around, maybe fishing, different places. So you'd always run into somebody, and they had a movie theater there, and
Sure.
so everyone
Sat on benches.
knew the Ruzickas. It's
Ruzickas.
phenomenal.
So
Carl talked about he went back there. How many years ago did you go back?
3. So we took all of us
people-
took great pride in the fact that our parents were not considered tourists; they were considered islanders.
Islanders.
Right? And that was a real source of pride for all
Oh
four
my
of
God,
us.
I can imagine.
Right? So I will say that we befriended another family, lived on Imlay, up in your area there, Norridge.
Yeah.
All right. But a family
Yeah,
was
on the northwest side here.
vacationed
Yes.
at the same time. All right. So they
Wow.
bought a property there and built a home, and they had their 50-year anniversary on the island. And our
Wow.
mom and dad hadn't been over there for like 20 something years. All right. And they parked on the main road, parked off to the side, and the taverns across the street and the eateries
Jeez.
are all in a row, right? And my father gets out of the car, all right, and somebody goes, "Tony!" And to this boy, I was like starting to cry that 20 years later, somebody recognized him right away and was
Wow.
so joyous that my mom and dad were back there.
Incredible. Incredible. We could be on here for 4 hours tonight. I wish we had 4 hours. This has been just touching on the base. So I normally end this with 5 questions. Carl and Tony have seen my podcast. But tonight I'm going to do something different. I'm going to go to each one of you and ask about yourselves, meaning this way. And I'm going to start with Carl. Carl, growing up as you guys did, and some of the stories and experiences and just everything that I heard here tonight in this 1 hour that we've been on, what do you want to say about Tom? And I'll start with you, Carl. Tom, Tony, and Barb.
Well,
growing up with them and how you guys grew up, the way a family I feel should be grown up.
So, Barb was an excellent student. And when we went to the grade schools, even though she's 9 years older, some of the teachers that she had became our teachers.
Sure.
And we always had, something to, a goal to try to be as good as our sister. All right, not let the students down, let the teachers down, because we'd be letting Barbara down.
Got it.
All right. Go way later, when Tony and I went out east to school, wasn't the easiest of times. I don't think we didn't let on too much to anybody, but it wasn't exactly every day of happiness. But we had
Sure.
refuge because our sister had moved out east with her husband and with the start of their family, and we'd either hitch a ride or take the train to their home and spend many a weekend over there. So it was like a savior to us. All right.
Sure.
Our brother Tom taught us all the sports. Yeah, I bat right-handed because Tom is righty, and Tony and I are mirror image twins. So I'm left-handed, Tony's right-handed. I bat, I play golf, everything right-handed because Tom taught me. All right? And our love of music started with Tom because in high school, Tom would go 2 days a week to Chicago Bandstand that was in the Merchandise Mart. Wow. It was on TV, every week. And at that time, we had a downstairs flat that for a period of time, our parents didn't rent it out, so we had some place to go with our friends. Sure. In our basement flat. Wow. All right. Wow. And we would go there and play the records that Tom was listening to and dancing to. And that sort of became our love of music.
Incredible.
All right. So that's what I would say about the two of them. And Tony, Tony's like an extension of me. So,
yeah, the extension.
You know what I mean? So I can't say anything about necessarily. Carl, Tony, and Barb? What's that?
Well, let's see. I'll kind of start with Barb, and that is that Barb was very popular in high school and dated the captain of the basketball team. I think she was either homecoming or M Club queen, and so I remember, she was very popular, and just as she got a little older, got out of high school, when she started dating her soon then to become husband, he had a TR3 sports car, if you remember that sports car. Okay. Very small. And they would sit out there at night, and the windows would fog up like crazy.
Barbara.
So I remember that. And then, with Tony and Carl, I mean, the reality is they were connected at the hip, and they did everything together. They dressed alike. They had the same exact friends. They both were in the same sports. They excelled in the sports. They both were very competitive against each other. And I think it made each one of them better as they grew up. And so what I would say is, as a close family, even though there's 9 years, we still get together and laugh a lot. We're going to be doing that in a few days back east. And, fantastic. And as family, we sometimes argue, but we forget about it and we're back to everything again, So, I mean, it was a great family to grow up in.
Come in. Tony, what do you think of Carl, Tom, and Barbara?
Well, Barb had a special place, not only with the family, but even in the house. Sure. She had her own room. Of course, it didn't have a door that you could close, and you could come up the back porch and go right into it, but it was still her own room.
Her own room.
And, as she got older, and we started to get a little bit older, it was sort of interesting having a young lady in the home. So, we
sure can imagine.
I can admit to doing a lot of spying. So,
yes, we could tell many a story.
We always respected the fact that she worked, and she worked for a dentist who was very kind, addressed most of our family needs.
Sure.
And you say she had a great number of boyfriends, and she ended up with the best one. Unfortunately, he passed away at an early age. But, it was great having Barbara around. And Tom was a major influence in the whole thing. Could play every sport.
Barb, I'm going to let you close it off here tonight. What do you want to say about these three guys here, Carl, Tom, and Tony? And
All I know is I am so fortunate to have three marvelous brothers who are wonderful men and have been the best of friends my entire life, and for whom I am so grateful because they have carried me through and they have encouraged me so many times over these past years. Growing up at 9, I was 9 when the twins were born. It was like, oh, Mom, do I have to do this? Do I have to? Because I was the other mother. So, those were the years that were enjoyed them, but looked at differently, obviously, because of the difference in age.
Sure.
But as we grew, we were always close, always close, and we are to this day still so close. We talk to each other at least once a week, sometimes more. We laugh. I can't wait till we're all together because we always laugh and laugh and laugh, and that's like the best thing that there is as far as I'm concerned. And I can always depend on them no matter what the situation might be. I feel very blessed.
That's fantastic.
Thank you.
I want to say something before I let you go. I always look for something when I do these interviews and podcasts, if it's an athlete, if it's a doctor, if it's a lawyer. But it hit me last week when Barb couldn't get on. And I thought about it all week, and I wanted to make sure that Barb was going to get on this time. And I got a little emotional with my wife on Saturday. We were going to a wedding, and she says, what are you doing by your computer with your suit on? I got to make sure that this Barbara comes on next week because they want this more than anything. But I'll never forget all three of you at one time, Carl, Tom, and Tony. You said, well, we got to get Barb on. And I'll never forget all three of you in some form or fashion said, we're not doing this without Barb. Ruzicka family, you're a family. And I really thank you for coming on a conversation with John Conenna.
Thank you.
And telling the story. This was fantastic.
Thank you, John.
I got water in my eyes. I know you can't see past the goggles.
Thanks, John.
Right.
Thank you, John, very much.
Thank you very much. We'll get this out on YouTube and Spotify in a couple days. So we could really see what family was about and go back to
and
those
still is. That's the secret, that it still is. No matter what direction our lives have gone, we have been there for each other. That's the important thing.
The timing is perfect because Saturday we are celebrating Barb's 85th birthday in Tewksbury, Mass. So we can all watch it on the big screen.
I want to date her in the TR3 right now. Not 85th. All right. Good
Thank you,
everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Love you guys.
Love you.
All right.
God bless, John.